Okay, this is the last lecture of this chapter, chapter 11, coordination and response. In today's lesson, we'll see what reflex actions are. Then we will look upon spinal and cranial reflexes, voluntary and involuntary actions, and conditioned reflex. First, let's discuss what reflex actions are. These are the actions that are immediate, sudden responses to a specific stimulus without our conscious control. Most of the time they produce the same response, that is a protective response, and they are not to be learned. These are instinctive and automatic. For instance, the reflex of sneezing, where you sneeze when there is a stimulus. Of course, it might be any irritant particle in the air passages, or extreme cold or temperature changes that lead us to sneeze. This reflex is a automatic and not learned action. It is instinctive, protective, and immediate and sudden also. So it's a reflex action. Let's see spinal reflexes. Actually, the reflex actions are divided into two: spinal reflexes and cranial reflexes, depending upon which structure of the CNS is controlling them. But there are also some reflexes where brain and spinal cord both are involved, but the control would be done by one. Spinal reflex involves knee jerk and withdrawal reflexes, as the name is indicating that these are the actions that are controlled by spinal cord. It involves knee jerk, where if an orthopedic physician strikes the knee with a hammer, you tend to raise your leg. This is a reflex action which is entirely controlled by spinal cord and does not involve the brain. Withdrawal reflex 2 is a spinal reflex where you tend to withdraw your hand if touching a hot object. You can see here that this reflex action is protective. It is not learned. You don't think before doing it. It is unconsciously done. It is immediate and sudden and protects you from the damage. Then we have cranial reflexes, which are the actions that are controlled by brain but not with the will. It's not consciously controlled, but brain is involved, which includes pupil reflex, blinking of the eye, and salivation. We have read about pupil reflex before, that the pupil tends to constrict in intense light and it tends to dilate during dim light. Pupil reflex actually protect us from the extreme intensity of the light. It protects our retina from the damage. Deliberate and involuntary actions. Deliberate actions are also known as voluntary actions. Now we have to differentiate between these two. Voluntary actions, as the name is indicating, are the actions that are under our control, under our conscious and willpower. On the other hand, the involuntary actions are not under our willpower. Voluntary actions may be rapid or slow depending upon our conscious control or our will, and they will always involve the brain. On the other hand, the involuntary actions are mostly fast, rapid, immediate, and sudden, and they may or may not involve brain. Now we have to look upon conditioned reflex, which is actually an action which is acquired from the past experience or learning with a stimulus which is originally ineffective in producing the response. For instance, if you can see here that a dog before conditioning is given the food, and at the look of the food, the dog started to produce more saliva. Now this was an unconditioned stimulus and a unconditioned response. Now what happens is that before the conditioning, a neutral stimulus of ringing the bell did not produce any salivation or no response in the dog. Now what we did is that during conditioning, we combined these two stimulus together, that we rang the bell and served the dog with the food. Now over the period of time, the dog learned that he will be given the food or he will be served the food only after the bell rings. So now the stimulus of the ringing of the bell, which was ineffective before, produces a response after conditioning, as you can see in the diagram here, that even if you do not serve the food to the dog, only ringing the bell, which was actually an ineffective stimulus before conditioning, is producing a response here. So this is a conditioned reflex where the dog has learnt from the past experience that he will be given the food only after the bell rings. So now even if the food is not given, just upon ringing the bell, the dog will start to produce more saliva.